Anyways, the talk, keeping abreast, natural ways to prevent breast cancer. And a couple disclaimers before I start the talk. I'm not an oncologist. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm just somebody who's passionate about health and wellness. And currently I'm doing a fellowship with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And it's really more of a preventative practice than a sickness practice, which is really what we do in mainstream medicine. Wait till you're sick, come see me. This is more about wellness. And the more I've learned and the more I've looked into things, you know, it's become clear to me that the path we're going down in our mainstream medical model is a little bit off base. There's things that we can do to help prevent some of the diseases that we suffer from. And you know, maybe it's a practice of making well people more well, but there are things that we need to pay attention to that we go through our lives and really don't consider, and then we end up with a degenerative disease when we're 50, 60 years old. So that's kind of what spawned this talk. You know, I've received a little bit of criticism for maybe being on the alternative edge or raising people's hopes inappropriately. But I'll tell you, what I'm going to tell you tonight and the things I'm going to teach you are all scientifically based. This isn't me standing up here saying, la, 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 I think this is the way it should be, so this is what I'm preaching. Everything I'm going to tell you has scientific studies to back it up. And although they may not be double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized prospective trials, a lot of the stuff you can't do that on. That's typically how a drug comes to market. These are all natural remedies and things just to consider in your overall health and wellness. To start, where do we stand here? You know, the war on cancer was announced January 22nd, 1971 by Richard Nixon. He figured, we're smart enough to put a man on the moon. We can split an atom and create an atomic bomb. By golly, we can cure cancer. If we throw enough money at this, this is something we're going to end. So after billions and billions of your dollars later, what do we have to show for our efforts in the war against cancer? Well, the cancer incidence adjusted for age and population has decreased maybe 5%. And that's not because of some cure or some study or what we've discovered. The reason cancer has gone down maybe 5% is because of the increased knowledge of the risks of tobacco use and abuse. As people have started smoking less, the incidence of cancer has decreased. Now, a lot of people say, well, cancer really hasn't gone up. There's just more people. The population has aged. But the one reason we know cancer is going up is because if you look at children, we don't screen children for cancer, but the incidence of cancer in children has been rising more and more. Currently, cancer is the second leading cause of death in America, and it's rapidly gaining ground on heart disease, which is #1. And cancer actually is the #1 leading cause of death in many age groups, especially the younger age groups. Specifically addressing breast cancer is the second most common cancer in women following skin cancer. About 210,000 cases of breast cancer were diagnosed last year, 40,000 deaths from breast cancer. I mean, it's really an epidemic that affects nearly everybody. You know, if you haven't had it or experienced, you're probably aware of a loved one, a family member, a friend. I mean, it's in epidemic proportions and increasing. Essentially, if you live to be 95, you have a 1 in 8 lifetime chance of developing cancer. And that's opposed to 1 in 10, 15, 20 years ago, and 1 in 20 about 50 years ago. Actually, if you look at the timeline of when cancer has developed, it's really significantly increased since World War II, about the 1950s on, and that's for a number of reasons, which I'll share later. Now, the current status of breast cancer, as some of you probably saw the article I had in the Salisbury Post, the current emphasis, and with Breast Cancer Awareness Month, is on diagnosis and treatment. We need to diagnose, we need to treat. And really, I mean, my rallying cry is, what about prevention? You know, we can diagnose everybody. And, you know, the more we screen, we're not going to screen away cancer. I mean, if you screen it, you have cancer, it's too late. Really, the emphasis should be on prevention. You know, 1,000 mammograms aren't going to cure cancer and actually are probably going to cause cancer because of the ionizing radiation. We can talk about that a little bit later. But I think the emphasis needs to be shifted back more towards prevention and less on diagnosis and treatment. And that is undeniably important, but prevention plays a big role. And again, People can say this is all touchy-feely, tree hugger, granola crunch, and medicine, but really, these are the lifestyle habits that we should adopt to improve our health and wellness. And one of the benefits of all this, you're not just preventing cancer, you're preventing numerous degenerative diseases that we suffer from as a nation. You know, the race for the cure, as long as we're talking about the cure, we're missing out on cancer continues to occur. You know, the magic bullet philosophy, we're going to find the cure. And you know, one little mental game I play with myself is with all the money that people have raised, the time, the talents, the efforts they've contributed in racing for the cure, when that cure is found, you think we're going to get a discount for all we've contributed? I wouldn't bet on it. There's many cancer nonprofits, and for the most part, they do a lot of good. But in some ways, a lot of the nonprofits can be seen as corporate frontmen for some of the pharmaceutical industries to help raise money. I mean, everybody wants to end the scourge of cancer. And who doesn't? I mean, we will do whatever we can, but in some ways, people can be manipulated. So that, you know, it's important to know where the money's going that you're contributing, where the time, effort, and talent's going. Pinkwashing, of course, is the term that's given to corporations that support in the fight against cancer, yet they make products that actually can induce cancer. I mean, the analogy I used was buckets for the cure. You know, you put a nice big pink bucket of chicken that's filled typically with hormones, trans fats, a lot of cancer-inducing substances. So in a way, when you just keep our eyes open and not believe everything we're told. So what do we know? What causes cancer? There's a myriad of things that cause cancer. And these aren't in any particular order of first to last or most important. One of the things that's often overlooked is toxins, or what are called xenoestrogens. And the analogy I said back to 1950, we've seen the rate of cancer go up significantly. A lot of that has to do with the synthetic chemicals that we've introduced into our environment, which are amazing, the number that, and more all the time. Herbicides, pesticides, many of which have chemical structures similar to estrogen. It gets into our body. It's often stored in fat. When you have a foreign body in your system, your body does whatever it can to get rid of it. It'll store some of these xenoestrogens in fat that often give you a low level of estrogen stimulation. They have different effects on the receptors in the body, some clinging tightly and continuing to provide estrogenic stimulation. They've even done studies in newborns where from a newborn they draw the cord blood out, they test it for all the toxins. 287 toxins found in a newborn's cord blood. So from the moment you're born, there's toxins in your system. There's no way we're going to get rid of them, but just to be aware that they are there and to know that they're possibly what we can do to metabolize them or flush them out of our systems is important. And toxins come in all forms, all shapes and sizes. Household cleaners, personal care products. The average woman uses 12 personal care products a day. And many of them have low-level carcinogens, low-level toxins in them, to which the industry says, well, it's just a little tiny bit, so it really shouldn't hurt anything. Well, that's true, but if you're using 12 of them a day cumulatively, that can have an effect on you. I mean, there's a good video on the internet, The Story of Cosmetics, which explains these facts a little bit more. But you know, it's the cumulative effect of toxins in the body. They have such things as parabens, phthalates, all of which are xenoestrogens or similar to estrogens. Dry cleaning. There's been studies showing that if you work in a dry cleaner, or if you live above a dry cleaner, you live a shorter lifespan. There's perchloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, all these different things. So when you take your dry cleaning home, you know, you probably think, I'm going to leave it in the bag until I use it because it's clean. When in reality, what you should do is take it on the back porch, take the bag off and air it out for a couple of hours to get all those toxins out of there, because you're going to be putting it on right up against your skin. What I'll frequently tell people is, if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your skin, because your skin absorbs everything you put on it. So that's another thing to consider when you're considering toxins and the harmful effects they can have for you. Pesticides and perfumes. Perfumes have parabens in them. Parabens are plasticizers. They're also xenoestrogens. Radiation. Some people claim that some of the biggest carcinogens are exposure to radiation, medical radiation in particular. Repeated radiological exposure is cumulative in nature. The more you get, the more you're at risk for cancer. And that's an argument a little bit with mammograms. When the U.S. Preventive Task Force came out about a year ago and said women between the age of 40 and 50 shouldn't have mammograms, everybody was screaming, oh, these are death panels, this is all because of Obamacare. But in reality, that particular task force was created back when Bush was president to look at all the data in mammogram screening. And what they determined was in younger women, their breasts are more dense. They oftentimes have to have more mammograms. Each mammogram is worth about 0.4 rads. And that cumulative effect over 10 years is ionizing radiation to the breast, which that in and of itself can be carcinogenic. So in actuality, it wasn't a death panel that determined that. It actually is a well-researched study. And when they look at nationally all over the world, there's increased risk of developing breast cancer from overexposure to mammograms. And I'm not personally against screening or mammograms. What I'm against is actually lying to women about what the facts are, what the risks are, and what the benefits are that we hope to achieve. Because there are risks to mammograms too. You're not going to hear that a lot, but if you look into it a little bit, you'll see you cannot continue to radiate your breast year after year after year after year. There was a study back in 1993 in Sweden where they did yearly mammograms on women aged 40 to 55. And when they looked at that pool of women, there was a 29% higher death rate in that group that had mammograms starting at the age of 40. A lot of women beat themselves up. Oh, geez, I missed my mammogram this year. I need to get that done. I don't want to die of cancer. Well, you shouldn't beat yourself up over that. You may be doing yourself a favor, actually. So it's just something else to consider. And it's just important to keep in mind, do I really need to have this radiological test? We have some clinics that offer full-body CT scans to diagnose whatever. And part of the problem in our mainstream model is overdiagnosis. The harder we look, the more we're going to find something. And the more we're going to find something that may mean absolutely nothing. So, and speaking of radiation, this is another controversial topic. I've also said cell phones are kind of the cigarettes of the 21st century. And when you're talking a picture says 1,000 words, I think this says it. This is research work by Dr. Om Gandhi. And of course, these aren't breasts, these are brains, these are people's skulls. But this is the level of cell phone radiation penetration in a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and in an adult. So the point being made here, since we're talking about breast cancer, is your bra is not a cell phone carrier or a cell phone purse. There's actually reported incidences of women who have used their bra as a cell phone carrier. They've subsequently developed breast cancer in the pattern in which they carried their cell phone. There's not going to be a million people we can point out that this has happened to, but this reminds us to follow the precautionary principle. Until all the data is in, much of the research that we read these days, you always have to follow where it came from. Where's the funding from? In medicine we say, I only practice evidence-based medicine. Well, yeah, if you look where that evidence came from, follow the paper trail, who paid for that evidence, there's a big difference between independent studies and industry-funded studies. And that's the distinction to make, really. So, you might hear, there's a study that came out recently, oh, cell phones are safe. Most people don't read the insert that comes with their cell phone, but it does say, keep the cell phone essentially 1 inch away from your ear when you're talking, and do not carry it on your body when it's on. Read the package insert. And I guess I'm kind of banging on the cell phone industry, but the insurance companies will not offer insurance to the cell phone industries for long-term damage. No insurance company has covered any of the cell phone companies for when people develop cancer 20, 30, 40 years down the road. I'm not telling you cell phones definitely cause cancer. I'm just saying be careful, especially in kids. Especially in kids. We use cell phones like nobody's business now, and protect your children especially. Their skulls are thinner, their brains are bigger, and they're more at risk. Genetics. A lot of people think, well, genetics, I've developed cancer because I lost in the genetic lottery. And really, genetically, genetics is the cause of about maybe 5 to 10% of cancer. 15 if you're really stretching it. There's the BRCA gene, the BRCA1, BRCA2, those are breast cancer protective genes. I'm not going to specifically speak to them, but they do put you at a higher risk for breast cancer. But the interesting thing is, women who carry the BRCA gene now are developing breast cancer 3 to 4 times more frequently than their mothers and grandmothers did back 40, 50 years ago. There's an article out a month ago saying that women who have a BRCA gene are now developing that breast cancer at about the age of 42 when it used to be 48. So the BRCA gene is something, if you have a high incidence of breast cancer in your family, something to look into. But again, most breast cancer is 5 to 10% genetically mediated, specifically with the BRCA gene. But also genetically mediated is your estrogen metabolism, how your body breaks down estrogen, because it can break it down to good estrogen or cancer-causing estrogen. And then other people may ascribe their cancer to genetics when it may really just be environmental. How were you raised? What did you eat as you were being raised? So there's unknown genetic factors too. Smoking, of course we have to bash smoking, we're talking about cancer. But in reality, smoking is not a huge, huge cause of cancer. It is the cause of the #1 cancer killer of women, which is lung cancer. Breast cancer is the second most common cancer in women. Lung cancer is the most frequent killer of women. But certainly the free radicals that are generated from smoking do increase the risk of cancer. And they've done studies looking at women who smoked and their increased risk of cancer as they've grown older. Alcohol, 1 drink a day of alcohol has been said to increase the risk of cancer by 7 to 10%. And that's via many different mechanisms. Its effects on the liver, it can cause the liver to function less efficiently in breaking down estrogen, breaking down toxins, increased aromatase production. Aromatase is an enzyme that changes testosterone to estrogen. The more aromatase you have, the more estrogen you're making. So if you're going to drink wine, drink red wine. Red wine has resveratrol in it. Resveratrol is an aromatase inhibitor, also blocks some of the estrogen receptors. So, you know, 1 glass a day is probably okay, but really, 1 glass a day increases your risk by about 7 to 10% of developing breast cancer. A very commonly associated characteristic in cancer is obesity. There's been numerous studies demonstrating that people who do not have an ideal weight increase their risk of breast cancer to a significant degree. Obesity actually contributes to about 20% of all cancer deaths. They say about 18,000 cancer deaths per year are attributed to obesity. And the way that works is for many reasons. It's not just that you're overweight. Obesity increases aromatase production, more estrogen. Obesity is often a sign of insulin resistance, which the higher your insulin levels, the higher your risk of doing poorly with cancer. So obesity is a big factor. Insulin resistance, and this is not specifically just diabetes, but as our diet is more and more carbohydrate driven, the more insulin we make. Insulin is what drives your sugars into your cells. So if you're always eating sugar, simple carbs, white bread, white flour, white pasta, white rice, insulin goes up. Insulin stimulates inflammation in the body. And actually the Women's Health Initiative, the study that came out in 2003 showing hormone replacement causes cancer, actually it shows excess sugar in your diet causes cancer just as much as hormone replacement. And the hormone replacement they used in that study was actually synthetic hormones, not what are called bioidentical hormones. Increased insulin increases body fat. A lot of times you'll see someone who is a diabetic, once they go on insulin, they gain more weight because insulin protects your fat cells. High insulin levels at the time of diagnosis portend a worse prognosis for cancer. Not high glucose levels, but high insulin levels. Inflammation. You know, the saying I will often tell my patients is if you want to live a long, healthy life, you need to control 2 things, your insulin level and your inflammation level. And those 2 really go hand in hand. And I'm not talking inflammation like you get a dog bite or you get a cut. Chronic systemic inflammation. Our diet is very inflammatory with some of the foods that we eat. Cancer spreads via inflammation, and particularly nuclear factor kappa beta. That's the pro-inflammatory cytokine that a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are trying to find a cure for. If they can stop NF-κB, then that will be one of the cures towards cancer. But there are numerous foods and things that we can ingest, curcumin, green tea, that tame nuclear factor kappa beta. Cancer spreads via eliciting inflammation. If you can control your inflammation, you can decrease the spread of cancer. Inflammation allows cancer cells not to undergo programmed cell death, which is called apoptosis. And of course, most importantly, the diet. You know, the diet is something each of us do 3 times a day. And you can so influence how your life turns out by eating the proper foods. And unfortunately, you know, our American diet, or the standard American diet, is basically fertilizer for cancer. If we wanted to create the one diet that could kill people, cause degenerative disease, and allow the proliferation of cancer, we got it. Any other country that adopts our diet is following right in our footsteps. You know, in countries where they eat more or less processed food, more whole foods, they don't see rates of cancer like we do. A lot of the processed foods that we now consume are stripped of their nutrients. They have synthetic chemicals, preservatives. They're genetically modified. They're not the corn or the soy that you used to eat 50 years ago. They've been modified to, well, no, I won't get off topic. Meat consumption. You know, the meats that we eat. You don't think about it, but in order to help the cows grow, they inject growth hormones, estrogens. These things cause problems. The cows get sick. They give them antibiotics. 80% of the antibiotics that are used in this country are used on livestock. And then we ingest those. So in addition to that, the way we cook our meats, if you char them, they develop what are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are also carcinogenic. So meats can carry a heavy load of both hormones, pesticides, a lot of things that can make us sick. I forget which foundation, but it's stated that we should eat about 11 ounces of meat a week. 18 ounces if we're really pushing it. Some people eat that much in a day. You have to eat the proper type of meat, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Nutrient deficiency, big one. Maybe the one thing you want to remember from this talk is vitamin D. There are so many studies demonstrating the benefits of vitamin D in the prevention of breast cancer. One study, if you have a vitamin D level of 47, you have a 50%, if it's under 47, you have a 50% higher incidence of developing breast cancer than a woman who has a vitamin D level above 47. There's actually a Grassroots Health, which is trying to start Breast Cancer Prevention Month, and they're all about vitamin D. From their statements, the average woman should take about 8,000 IUs of vitamin D a day to get her levels up to an appropriate level to be breast cancer protective. You know, we've always looked upon vitamin D as being good for our bones, but boy, if you look at the research about what vitamin D does, it's too much to mention here, but it's very cancer protective, and we're not talking just breast cancer. We're talking about 20 different types of cancer that vitamin D is protective of. And the best way to get your vitamin D is by sun exposure, 20 to 30 minutes a day. Of course, you don't want to burn yourself, and most of us don't do that. I'll often tell patients, if you have your vitamin D level checked, don't be satisfied with just hearing that it's normal. Get the number. Find out what the number is and see if you need to optimize it a little bit. Iodine, we hardly get any iodine in our diet anymore. Iodine is kind of our primitive immune system. It kills bacteria, viruses, kills cancer. In Japan, they usually eat about 13.8 milligrams of iodine a day because they consume a lot of sea vegetables. We don't. The only form of iodine we get is iodized salt, and you know, everywhere you hear, don't eat salt, don't eat salt, don't eat salt, or most of us eat Celtic sea salt or sea salt. That really doesn't have a lot of iodine in it. So we're not getting enough iodine in our diets, but a good website is breastcancerchoices.org. They have a great a great panel of information. They talk a lot about iodine and the benefits on breast cancer. In Japan, they have a rate of breast cancer of about 1 in 20. Here, we're 1 in 8. That has, I think, probably to do more than just with iodine, but iodine's a big factor. Women, iodine in particular, the #1 storage site of iodine is the thyroid. #2, the breasts. #3, the ovaries. That's why women have 8 times higher incidence of thyroid problems than men. Men don't have breasts and ovaries, or they have breasts, but women's breasts and ovaries are competing for iodine just like the thyroid is. So women have an 8 times higher rate of thyroid disease, partly because likely they're not getting enough iodine. Nutrient deficiency, B vitamins. B vitamins are vital in the breakdown of estrogen. In estrogen metabolism, you need B vitamins to do that. B6, B12, folate. There's also a chemical in your body called homocysteine. The higher that rises, the more you suffer degenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, heart disease. You get rid of homocysteine with B6, B12, and folate. So B vitamins are important. They've done studies looking at people who take adequate amounts of Bs and those who take none, and their mental health, their overall health is much better. Most common nutrient deficiency in America really is omega-3 fatty acids, and that's from eating fish. And omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. Omega-6s are inflammatory. When we talk a little bit about inflammation there, the more omega-6s we have, the more inflammation we have. The more omega-3s we have, the less inflammation. Currently in America, we have a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 of about 20 to 1. Back when we were cave people, it was about 1 to 1. When cows are grass-fed, they increase their omega-6 production. When cows are fed corn and soy and all these other things that we currently feed them, omega-6s go through the roof. So lack of fiber and probiotics too. With processed foods, we're not getting enough fiber in our diet. We're just not. Unless you eat a whole foods-based diet, you're not consuming enough fiber. And you know, that US RDA for women's 25 grams of fiber a day, for men 35. The average American citizen's getting about 14 to 17 grams of fiber a day. We need to increase fiber in our diet. There's some simple things you can do to do that, which I'll talk about later. By increasing, this is a study of 700,000 women, by increasing your fiber intake of 10 grams a day, you reduce your risk of breast cancer by 7%. So what I'm thinking is, you can have that glass of wine a day as long as you're eating some Smart Brand or some all-brand brand buds along with your glass of wine. It's a neutral proposition. So fiber, and then probiotics. Probiotics are our gut bacteria, and they are very important for metabolizing our food, for making our B vitamins. There's a gut-mind connection. 70 to 80% of your immune system's in the gut. The gut has all the neural elements that your brain does. Actually, it makes serotonin and many neurotransmitters. And if you have poor gut health, you have poor health, period. And probiotics are what help ensure that we have proper gut health. A lot of the artificial sweeteners, Splenda I always mention, because Splenda is actually a pesticide. It was founded by a pesticide manufacturer. I'm not sure what led them to taste it, but Splenda itself, if you use too much of it, it kills your probiotics, kills your good gut bacteria. So fiber and probiotics are important too. Of course, hormone imbalance, that's important. And you know, each of these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, oxytocin, all of them play a role in how we express ourselves, how we live, how we feel, and all of them play a role in breast cancer regulation. Of course, estrogen is the most important, and proper estrogen metabolism is even more important. There's things that we can do to help influence our estrogen metabolism to go down the right path and not the wrong. And one of the things I often will tell people is it's good to know your 2:16 hydroxyestrone ratio. Estrogen is a generic term, and there's many different forms of estrogen: 2-hydroxyestrone, 4-hydroxyestrone, 16-hydroxyestrone. 2 is a pretty safe estrogen. 16 and 4 are carcinogenic estrogens. And one of the things that I think it's worthwhile to know is how you're breaking that down. And the way you determine if you break that down is by a simple urine test. Either a first morning void, or you collect your urine for 24 hours, send a little bit of it off to a lab, and they can tell you the ratio of these estrogen products you're making. And if you're making bad estrogen, or you're making carcinogenic estrogen, you don't need to take a drug to fix that. You need to eat more cruciferous vegetables. You need to maybe add some B vitamins to your diet. Maybe some iodine. Iodine influences estrogen metabolism to make estriol, which is a safer estrogen. So, you know, there's the ideal estrogen ratios, and you know the things, well, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this, and I'll be fine. But it kind of can slap you in the face a little bit if you get a 2:16 estrogen ratio done and you see how you're breaking it down. That's something I'd encourage you to ask your gynecologist about. You know, can we check my 2:16 hydroxyestrone ratio? And if they don't know what to do or how to accomplish that, tell them to give me a call. They never will, but that's a good ratio to know. As you see here, higher 2:16 ratio premenopausal women, decreased risk of breast cancer. Now, the World Cancer Research Fund in 2007 came out with and this is the world over, big committee, big meeting, all this kind of stuff. They came out with a 517-page book on recommendations for prevention of cancer. I've distilled some of these down, and I'll break these down even a little bit further as I discuss what I recommend for cancer prevention. But of course, body fat, be as lean as possible. The less body fat you have, the better. Physical activity, very important. Exercise is really one of the best breast cancer preventative drugs we have. For women, walking 30 minutes a day, 6 days a week, decreases your risk of breast cancer by 50%, and decreases your risk of breast cancer recurrence. And some of the drugs that are prescribed to prevent the recurrence of breast cancer don't even do that well. And that's not to say that you can't do the walk and take the drug too. So exercise, physical activity is important. It regulates insulin metabolism, it promotes well-being, and it doesn't, you don't have to kill yourself doing it, but you know, we're made to move, and if we don't move, that's where we start to suffer some of the degenerative diseases that we all face. Obviously, stay away from food and drinks that promote weight gain, carbonated sodas. You know, a nice little fact and figure, whenever you're reading food labels, divide the number of carbohydrates by 4, and that's the number of teaspoons of sugar in anything that you're eating. So a can of Coke, 50 grams of sugar, divide that by 4, 12.5 teaspoons of sugar in a can of Coke. That may be off by half a gram or so, but the less sugar in your diet, the better, honestly. Now, plant foods, more plant foods you ingest, the better. Animal foods, obviously avoid processed meat, red meats, and again, we'll talk about that a little later, but especially some of the processed meats with nitrates and nitrites, as those are carcinogenic. Alcoholic drinks, try to limit your intake of alcoholic drinks. Preservation, processing, again, that's excess salt, nitrates. Dietary supplements, you know, the World Cancer Research Fund's recommendation is try to meet your dietary nutritional needs through the appropriate diet. You know, and that's good, and that would be nice, but you got the USDA coming out every year saying, well, our soil's depleted. A tomato of today lacks 72% of the vitamin A of a tomato from 1950. So, you know, it's a little bit pie in the sky to say, make sure you're getting all your nutrients just from the food you eat. Unless you're raising them, you're nourishing the soil, and you're repleting the soil with all the minerals that should be there that have been stripped over the years. Breastfeeding, obviously, breastfeed as long as you can. Breastfeeding in and of itself reduces the risk of cancer by 4.3%. Pregnancy, a full-term pregnancy reduces the risk of breast cancer by 7%. So I guess you could balance that with the wine too, but just not while you're pregnant. Cancer, you know, the recommendation for cancer survivors is to follow all the above. So, you know, now I'll go into a little bit about what I personally recommend for prevention, some of which, of course, will reflect what the World Cancer Research Fund stated. Lifestyle, things you can do in your life. Keep it, you know, try to lose weight, keep a healthy weight, exercise, move, 3 to 5 hours a week. You know, again, you don't have to kill yourself doing it. Too much exercise can be stressful and cause oxidation and can be detrimental to your health, but stay active. The more healthy you are, the more muscle mass you have, the more your body can regulate insulin better, and numerous things. A good night's sleep. I'm not sure many of us are getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, but sleep is when your body restores itself. But more importantly, sleep is when your body makes melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone, and often I'll tell my patients, I'm not recommending you take melatonin because I want you to sleep. It's your nighttime vitamin. Melatonin's anti-cancer. It protects your brain. In women who are blind, they never see the light of day, and melatonin is regulated by exposure to light. So if your eyes hit the light, your melatonin production is shut off. Women who are blind, who never see the light of day, have a lower rate of cancer, have a lower rate of breast cancer, because their melatonin levels are usually way up there. So women who work the 3rd shift, their sleep cycles are often messed up because they're sleeping in the light of day. Studies have demonstrated that they have an increased risk of developing breast cancer. So a good night's sleep is not just for restoration, but also increase your melatonin levels, which, you know, they start to drop actually around the age 15 to 20. By 30, they're about half of what they were when you're younger. By 60, they're about 10%. So I will frequently have my patients take melatonin, just not only because I want them to sleep better, but because I want them to protect themselves. Melatonin deepens your stage 3 3 and 4 REM sleep, that's when you make growth hormone. Growth hormone helps with lean body mass and overall health. Obviously, avoid toxin exposure. Natural skincare products. Again, anything you put on your skin, you shouldn't be afraid to put it in your mouth. I guess that could liken back to washing your mouth out with soap. If you're going to do that, make sure it's a good pure soap as a child. So, but avoiding toxin exposure, really. Think about some of the things you're putting on your skin. There are many natural skin care products, which, you know, if you start to look at what's in some of the cosmetics, and first off, you may not even know because they're not required to label what's in their ingredients. That dates back to 1938, I believe, that left it up to the cosmetic manufacturers to determine what's safe and what's not. So yeah, Steve has a list in here of some of the things to look out for. There's sodium lauryl sulfate and just many chemicals in natural skincare products. Natural sanitary products, you know, you think organic tampons, what do I need those for? But there's chlorine that bleaches those and makes those white. There's dioxins. So, and you know, there's nothing more intimate than some of these sanitary items. That stuff gets into your system. So that's something to consider too. When I'm speaking of chlorine, you know, there's even the EPA says that a lifetime exposure to bleached coffee filters has an exposure of chlorine that's 8 times the recommended normal amount. So use the brown coffee filters. Consider using organic sanitary products. Of course, no smoking. Limiting alcohol intake is important. You know, it's 1 drink a day is probably okay, but you don't want to, as you add that up, 2 drinks, 3 drinks, it doesn't go up 7%, 14%, 21. It goes up 7%, 10%, 21%, 39%. So be careful about how much wine you're drinking or how many alcoholic beverages you're drinking. Again, red wine's better than white wine because of the resveratrol. Get some sun. That's how we get vitamin D exposure. Usually 20 to 30 minutes, peak midday. Most of us can't do that. And I will tell you, from checking people's vitamin D levels, there's an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency. But you know, a lot of people are concerned, I don't want to get too much vitamin D, and it's important. That to me is just as important to get checked as your cholesterol on a yearly basis, truly. And an optimal ratio is about 50 to 70. Know your 2:16 ratio. Again, I'd encourage you to ask your gynecologist to run that test for you. It's worthwhile knowing because, again, based on those results, you might be surprised at what you find and some of the things that you can do to affect that. Stay away from the xenoestrogens. That goes back to obviously avoiding some of the toxins. Grow some weeds in your lawn. You know, I always prided myself on having a nice lawn and had the fertilizer company come, and I got weeds now. I could, you know, once you learn this stuff, you can't unlearn it. You can't go back to, so I just cut it when the weeds start growing higher. But breastfeed, you know, as long as possible. In a lot of countries where they breastfeed for 2-3 years, their incidence of breast cancer is much lower than it is here. Another thing that there's really not a lot of research on, but one of the things that causes breast cancer is it often causes in the breast ducts or the breast linings where the fluid that is excreted from the ducts just sits there. It deteriorates, it degenerates, and then it creates free radicals, which then initiate breast cancer. So one of the things that's often, or not often, but is recommended to be done is breast and nipple massage. Because what that does is it elevates your level of oxytocin, 100% actually, by breast massage, 10 minutes, a couple times a week. And that helps expel or stimulate the release of some of the deteriorating or degenerating excretory products from the breasts. Detox, take a sauna, treat your liver nicely. Your liver, you know, a lot of Eastern cultures, in America, we regard the heart as the main organ. You know, Valentine's Day, nice heart on a card. Most other cultures, it's the liver. You just can't put a liver on a Valentine's Day card and really get a lot of respect. But you need to take care of your liver. You don't want to continue to assault it with processed foods, chemicals, toxins, drugs. The more you can take care of your liver, make sure it's detoxified, the better off you're going to be. Obviously, handle and deal with stress properly. You know, the American Cancer Society will tell you stress does not cause cancer. But many other research studies will tell you, yes, it does. Done studies in Iran over a long period of time, and identified women under stress, and people with the highest stress levels also had the highest cancer levels. Stress depletes your B vitamins. It raises your cortisol level, which raises your insulin level, which raises your sugar levels. So stress is important, and it's something each of us is facing exponentially, really. I mean, as time goes on and we get more involved, this, that, and the other thing, our lives are haywire. Unless you take some time to attend to yourself and attend to your stress, it can cause a lot of problems. And of course the fight against cancer starts in the kitchen. And I'll outline for you what I believe is the optimal diet. And nobody's perfect. I mean, it's hard to stick to some of these things, but the more you can stick closer to this, the better off you're going to be. Organic, whole foods, plant-based diet. 5 to 9 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Limit the calories as best you can. In America, nobody's starving anymore. We eat a lot, mostly because it's available. Not always because we're hungry. And I'll often tell people, you're not eating to feed your stomach. Think of yourself as eating to feed your cells. Because if you're eating crap, that's what your cells are seeing too. It's not going to help you in the long run. That's just going to hurt you. The more organic-based foods you can eat, the better. Now there'll be different people saying, "Oh no, it makes no difference." They've done tests on children. They fed them a conventional diet, analyzed their urine, and they found a ton of pesticides. Put them on an organic diet, no pesticides, everything cleared up. Put them back on the conventional diet, or conventionally farmed foods, more pesticides. And it kind of drives me crazy because we talk about conventional farming techniques now, when really, those are kind of the newer farming techniques, because the conventional farming techniques 50, 100 years ago were organic. But now we're talking about organic farming as it's some type of oddity. And it's kind of a shame, actually, because if you want to raise organic crops, you need to pay a surcharge. There's all kinds of governmental fees that you have to cover. That's why organics are more expensive, while they're subsidizing the genetically modified, heavily fertilized foods that we all eat. That's why they're cheaper. But optimally, a whole foods-based diet is better. When we're talking meat, organic, grass-fed, hormone, antibiotic-free meat. And we have some providers for that here in town. Bame Farms, Wild Turkey Farms. They're smaller operations, but what's that? Simply Good Natural Foods. I didn't know if you still carried meat or not, but yeah, and Simply Good Natural Foods. Organic meat has a higher ratio of omega-3 fatty acids. It also has a fat in it called conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, which is actually an anti-cancer fat. So bovine growth hormone, or Posilac is the brand name of it, is injected into dairy cows to promote production of milk. Of course, in addition to production of milk, it also causes mastitis, which then requires antibiotics. And these poor cows, I mean, it's kind of a mess. But that's what you're looking at when you're looking at organic milk versus conventional milk. And what the bovine growth hormone does, it raises insulin-derived growth factor, which is high IGF is associated with cancer. And when the milk is pasteurized, that stuff doesn't leave. So it's being passed on to anybody who's drinking regular milk or dairy. Most other countries in the world won't allow bovine growth hormone into their dairy products. Actually, pretty much every country in the world except America. And we've kind of taken the tact, well, it hasn't been proven to be dangerous, so it's okay. All the other countries in the world take the tact, it hasn't been proven to be safe, so we're not using it. And that's where you kind of like to think your government would look out for you a little bit better, but they're not.
Zimbabwe approved it.
Did Zimbabwe approve it? Yeah. But, the European Union, Asia, Canada, Mexico, none of these places allow it. Japan, yeah. So bovine growth hormone is, you're wondering why your 8-year-old is starting her period. That could play a role. Omega-3 fatty acids, 2 to 3 servings of fish per week. Wild caught preferably, because a lot of the farm-raised fish, they're fed corn and soy. And again, they have an elevated omega-6 fatty acid content. And not only are they fed corn and soy, they're fed chemicals to make their skin orange, so it looks like, if you look at wild-caught salmon versus farm-raised salmon that doesn't have that's not colored, You'll see a white piece of salmon versus a nice rich orange piece of salmon. So I'll often, you know, if you say I can't take fish oil is yucky, there's many different types of fish oil. Barlean's makes a good brand that's pina colada, peach mango, lemon, tastes good. And I'll often tell people too, consider using some sardines. You know, and everyone, sardines.
Sorry, we sold them all at the last conference.
Oh, did you? Well, I'm telling you, sardines, boneless, skinless, wild-caught sardines, taste just like tuna. I got a kick the other day because one of my patients texted me. She was so proud of herself. She had made a salad with tomatoes, feta cheese, and wild-caught boneless, skinless sardines. She was so excited she wanted to text me a picture of her dinner. But they're pretty good. They taste just like tuna, and that is fish oil. I mean, if you don't want to take the supplements, eat some sardines. You'll have to trust me on that or try it. I mean, wild-caught, boneless, skinless sardines. The more... What's that?
Don't use tuna.
Yeah, well, yeah, another good point. You know, sardines are little fish. They don't live that long. Tuna, who grow and grow and grow, they're toxic with mercury and a lot of other chemicals. Yeah.
Which fish
Right.
you recommend?
Well,
Which fish would have less mercury levels?
sardines. So, I mean, a small short-lived fish, but...
Sardines and anchovies are really, like you said, short lifespans.
Yeah.
They live a couple weeks.
They don't have time to accumulate all the toxins. But if you're going to eat fish, salmon or any of those, look for wild caught. You don't want farm raised. I can't tick off a list of the top 5 mercury contaminated fish for you, but I know swordfish, tuna, all those things have a little higher. Yeah, Steve can, but I can't. But so, I mean, just be cognizant of that. The bigger the fish, the more likely they're to have some type of toxin in it. Sugar. The more, we eat about 150 to 170 pounds of sugar a year, each of us. Back in the 1900s, we averaged about 10 pounds a year. And sugar is what's driving insulin resistance, diabetes, many problems. I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners, NutraSweet, or aspartame. It breaks down into methanol, which is wood alcohol, and formaldehyde. So there's, you know, actually aspartame is the most complained about food item to the FDA. As I told you, Splenda before, it's a pesticide. Actually, probably one of the safest artificial sweeteners is saccharin, which received a lot of grief years ago. But even so, I'm not recommending that. What I recommend as sweeteners is stevia or xylitol. Xylitol is what's called a sugar alcohol. And when you look at sugars, sugars have what's called a glycemic index. The higher the glycemic index, the more it affects your insulin. Table sugar has a glycemic index of 100. Xylitol has a glycemic index of 7. The lower your glycemic index, the better. Coconut sugar is another thing, or palm sugar, that has a glycemic index of 35. But the more you can stay away from sugar, the healthier you're going to be in the long run. Consuming good fats, stay away from the vegetable fats such as corn oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil. Those are omega-6 fatty acids, you know, and I joked before at one of my previous talks, you know, if you don't like your neighbor, give them your corn oil or safflower oil. They cause inflammation, they're bad. You really ought to get rid of them and use either olive oil, or if you're going to cook, coconut oil. Coconut oil has a very high heat point. It's a medium chain fatty acid. Your body can digest it and break it down easier, and it's a good source of energy. Fiber. Increase the fiber in your diet. And a couple ways you can do that. Smart Bran is a cereal that's about 14 grams of fiber per serving, or Kellogg's All-Bran Bran Buds, but they have high fructose corn syrup and genetically modified bran in them. So the Smart Bran's a little better cereal to consider. Metamucil. The more you can increase your fiber and more regular you can become, that's the mechanism by which you detoxify and get rid of the toxins in your system. And again, our diets are we just don't have enough fiber. Our closest relative, the gorilla, 200 to 300 grams of fiber a day. We're getting maybe 14 to 17, and many people less than that. Green tea extract. That's the other reason in Japan why they have a much lower incidence of cancer than we do. Green tea actually inhibits the growth of blood vessels that provide oxygen for new cancers. Usually about 2 to 3 glasses a day. If you ever make green tea, steep it 8 to 10 minutes. And really, it should best be drunk about an hour or 2 after it's been steeped, because it loses some of its potential, well, some of the catechins, or the chemical in it that are effective. It loses some of those as time passes on. But yes?
Does all green tea have caffeine in it?
No, I mean, there's decaffeinated green tea too. So if there's a concern, or you don't want to make the tea, take green tea extract. You can get that in a capsule. It's Simply Good Natural Foods. But green tea extract, if you don't want to bother with the burden of having to make tea all the time, green tea extract's a very good thing. Dr. Mahmood recommends everybody take that because of some of the health benefits of it. But that's another reason Pride Japan has a 1 in 20 rate versus our 1 in 8. Fermented foods, probiotics. We don't get enough fermented foods in our diet, actually. Maybe the closest we get is yogurt, and that has such a small amount of probiotics. Fermented foods, we're talking kimchi, which is a Korean dish. It's almost served with every meal over there. Natto, miso, tempeh. Fermented soy is okay. Personally, I'm kind of an anti-soy person because it's very estrogenic. There's too much debate on the benefits and risks of soy, but also most soy is GMO, genetically modified soy. So I try to steer people away from soy unless it's fermented soy. The best way really to get your probiotics if you're not eating a lot of fermented foods is by taking probiotic supplements. The more you can introduce good bacteria in your gut, the better, particularly if you've been on a round of antibiotics. Excessive use of antibiotics in and of itself increases your risk for breast cancer via the mechanism by which not only can toxify your liver, but kills all your good probiotics too. So,
I think it's a good norm to take every day. How many billions?
Well, it depends.
I mean, just an everyday one, not one after any.
Yeah, I think probably 5 to 10 billion a day. But the question with probiotics is what's the quality of the probiotics? Now, one of my favorite probiotics actually is Dr. Ohira's. This is a Japanese guy. This guy cultures these probiotics in big vats for 3 years. So, you're probably going to absorb the probiotics that are in this capsule. It has prebiotics in it, which is the food that feeds the probiotics. But that's one of my favorite ones because the question is, it might say 20 billion probiotics or 50 billion, but if it's been sitting on a shelf for 9 months, studies have shown it's down to 2 billion or 3 billion. And the question often arises too with a lot of these supplements and stuff, how do I know which one to take? What's the good one? And I can recommend you to a site, consumerlab.org. Consumer Lab is doesn't accept any advertising, but it's $29 or $30 a year. But they look at all the supplements and grade them whether they're acceptable or not. They won't give you a list of this is the best one, this is the worst. But if your question is, and a lot of medical doctors will say, I just don't know what supplements to recommend to my patients because I don't know what the heck they're getting. Well, you can look it up on Consumer Lab. It's really a good and useful educational site, and they cover everything as far as supplements and quality. This quote I just threw up there because I thought it was pretty good. We need to get back to nature and essentially nourish health rather than just treat sickness. Another quote I like is, the doctor's job is just to keep the patient entertained while the patient's body heals itself. Because that's often true. You give the body what it needs, and it can do a lot for itself. The supplement part now, again, vitamin D, extremely important. I freely recommend to people 2,000 to 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. Now, Grassroots Health says to get your vitamin D up to the level that's really strongly anti-cancer, about 8,000 IUs a day. I would recommend that you have your vitamin D levels checked. I personally think it's better to take vitamin D every day. The way it's often treated medically is, you get a low vitamin D level, they'll give you 50,000 units once a week, or 50,000 units once a month. And my objections to that, and that's not based on any research, but what's the one day a week that you need 50,000 units and all the other days that you don't need any? And in addition to that, too, with so much gut dysfunction in the United States in our diets, how much of that 50,000 that you're taking that one day are you really absorbing? So I personally think it's better to take 5,000 to 10,000 a day. But again, Grassroots Health quotes 8,000 as being the optimal amount to get your levels up. That's something you want to check. A multivitamin with B complex, even though we're supposed to get all of our nutrients from the diets that we eat, it often doesn't happen. And B complex vitamins, they're water soluble. If you don't need them, your body they pass right through you. Iodine, iodine's a little bit more tricky because taking too much or not taking enough can really have some adverse consequences. But again, in Japan, they take 13.8 milligrams a day. They don't take, they consume that via their diet. But there are some iodine supplements, iodoral, Lugol solution. If you want to go the natural route, you can take kelp. Maybe it won't let you control the dose of iodine that you're getting as much. But iodine, when you have breast cancer, there's little channels that develop in the breast cancer cells that iodine can pass in and out of and essentially kill the breast cancer cells. On breastcancerchoices.org, there's a lot of information about using iodine to help prevent breast cancer. Omega-3 fats, if you're not going to be eating 3 or 4 cans of sardines a week, there's always fish oil supplements you can take. Preferably pharmaceutical grade. There's 4 grades of supplements: animal grade, nutraceutical, medical grade, and pharmaceutical grade. And you want a pharmaceutical grade supplement. Now, you know, you can get prescription fish oil now, and of course it's pharmaceutical grade, but you can get pharmaceutical grade fish oil. Here, it's simply good natural foods. You want a pharmaceutical grade. You know, for the people that say, I can't take fish oil, it tastes awful, well, that's a sign that it's probably rancid and it's old. So keep your fish oil in the refrigerator, by the way, too, because it oxidizes and deteriorates with time. So omega-3 fats, there's other sources. There's plant sources of omega-3s too: walnuts, chia seeds, hemp seeds. I3C and DIM are actually, yes?
Is the flax oil or?
Flax oil, flax seeds.
Either.
If you're going to use flax seeds, though, grind them up right before you eat them, because your body, they'll just pass right through if you don't grind them up. They need to be ground up in a coffee grinder. But if you grind up a pound of flax seeds, as soon as you grind them up, they start to oxidize. So really, if you're going to use flax seeds, grind them up in a coffee grinder and then put them on your salad. But that's a good source of omega-3 fats, flax oil. Problem with omega-3 fat, plant-based omega-3 fats, they make what's called alpha-linoleic acid, and your body has to convert that to the EPA and the DHA, which is found in fish oil. And most people aren't terribly efficient at doing that. So flax oil is a good source of omega-3 fats, but fish oil is really actually better.
What's the solution if you're a vegetarian?
Well, there is no solution, really. Continue with your flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds. Walnuts, yeah, walnuts are a good source of vitamin E too, but there's really not a solution. So,
acai is a omega-3 benefit as well.
But acai, ACAI, you see that for weight loss claims and everything. But I3C and DIM is essentially extracts from cruciferous vegetables. I'm telling you, the more cruciferous vegetables you can eat, the better. And that's kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, all of those things are strongly anti-cancer in more ways than one. If you don't want to eat a lot of that stuff because you can't stand it, you can take an I3C or a DIM supplement, preferably DIM, really. But not only does it have this, but it has what's called glucosinolates, which attack cancer in a different mechanism. So the more cruciferous vegetables you eat, the better. Because of all the anti-cancer properties they have. At the end, I have a little story. Cancer hates cabbage, and it's true. Curcumin's another one. Curcumin's an Indian spice, which is from the spice turmeric, and it's strongly anti-cancer. It shuts down nuclear factor kappa beta. It's nature's anti-inflammatory, and if you want to control your inflammation, curcumin. Put it over the foods you eat. You can buy it via supplements. It's the most research nutraceutical for cancer treatment and cancer prevention. They use it a lot in India, have a much lower rate of solid organ cancers, Alzheimer's, many other diseases. I recommend it to my patients with arthritis. Curcumin, fish oil, and vitamin D is kind of my natural anti-inflammatory regimen. But curcumin's a very strong, powerfully anti-cancer ingredient.
Is that from cumin?
Now, cumin and curcumin are two different, totally separate things. Curcumin is the active ingredient in the spice turmeric, but cumin is actually different than curcumin. Curcumin's real yellow. You gotta make sure it doesn't stain anything in your kitchen, but they're two separate spices. And you know, I didn't even really list spices on here, but there's a great book, Healing Spices. The more spices you use in your food, the more, you know, you have to attack cancer from all different angles. And the more of these things you incorporate into your diet, the better off you're gonna be. Of course, the green tea extract, either the tea or the extract. Probiotics. The benefits of probiotics are so significant. They go far beyond just cancer prevention. They go overall health. It's in a way another organ in your system. There's 1 trillion probiotics, bacteria within your gut. It's kind of disgusting to think, but you want to have the good ones and not the bad. The more bad probiotics you get, the sicker you're going to be. Melatonin, I recommend that freely. Usually 1 to 3 milligrams, more if you need it. It's not Ambien, it's not Lunesta, it's not going to knock you out. But sometimes you need to find your right dose. It's been recommended that women on chemotherapy take 20 milligrams a day. Now, when it comes to hormones in breast cancer, Synthetic hormones are what cause a lot of the risk for breast cancer. The Women's Health Initiative that came out in 2003, that was using Premarin, which is estrogen, pregnant mare urine. It's a synthetic estrogen. It's not an estrogen that women's bodies are made to handle. And it was using Provera, which is a synthetic progesterone. And that did demonstrate an increased risk of breast cancer, a lot of other problems too. Of course, it decreased the risk of osteoporosis and colon cancer, but when you look at the body of literature on hormone replacement, the synthetic hormones are what often increase the risk of breast cancer and actually, or increase the risk of cancer or other diseases. There's a couple studies from France that look at the use of bioidentical hormones. And just to put it in perspective, you'll often hear, you shouldn't use bioidenticals, there's no research to support that. And what person is really saying is, I haven't really looked up the research because it's out there, I just never read about it. Because it's true, in France there's a study, 54,000 women, actually two studies, 54,000, 80,000 women. On one arm of the study they used Premarin and Provera, one arm of the study they used nothing, and one arm of the study they used bioidentical estrogen and bioidentical progesterone. The people that used the synthetic hormones had a 40% higher risk of developing breast cancer. People that used the bioidentical progesterone and estrogen had a 10% lower risk of developing cancer than the people that did nothing. So, you know, to be threatened with, don't take bioidentical hormones, they cause cancer, there's many good studies. Actually, there's not one study demonstrating that the use of bioidentical progesterone or estrogen increased the risk of the development of cancer. There's numerous studies showing that use of progesterone actually not only protects against cancer, but protects against all-cause mortality. So synthetic hormones are something to be wary of, and that includes oral contraceptives. You know, we think of hormone replacement as something that someone in menopause does. Oral contraceptives also have the same effects. From one study, 15-year-old girls, age 15 to 20, for each year you're on an oral contraceptive, you increase your risk of breast cancer by 15%. So over that 5 years, that's 75% increased risk. So, you know, there's some risk to oral contraceptives. It's easy to put someone on, they work very well, they control your cycles, but there's some downsides too. Read the package insert, and that'll be enough to convince you. Optimize thyroid function. As I was talking earlier, women have a lot of thyroid dysfunction. The more optimized your thyroid function is, T3. T3, which is one of the thyroid hormones, stimulates the production of natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are part of your body's immune system to fight cancer. Hypothyroidism is associated with the development of cancer. There's a correlation there. So the better your thyroid works, the better. And of course, educate yourself, read, think for yourself about the risks of synthetic versus bioidentical hormone replacement if you choose to go that route. Some testing you can do. Again, we talked about the urine hydroxy-216. The BRCA testing, if you have a rich family history of breast cancer, it's worthwhile doing. SNP testing, which is actually, now that we've kind of unraveled the human genome, we can actually test individual genes to determine if you have a defect that inhibits you from metabolizing estrogens and other toxins properly. And that's kind of new and up and coming, but that is certainly available. Thermography is another alternative to mammography. What thermography is it's essentially a picture of the breast and the heat coming off the breast. Thermography oftentimes can detect vascular changes or vascular flow patterns within the breast, and it's been said to be able to detect breast cancer when it's 256 cells, whereas a mammogram will detect breast cancer when it's about 4 billion cells or 1 millimeter. Thermography is a useful adjunct to consider if you don't want to be having mammograms every year and increase your risk of exposure to ionizing radiation. Now, and I was very happy to see Christiane Northrup, who's often on the talk shows and on Oprah, wrote The Wisdom of Menopause. She had an article last year that came out recommending thermography. Nobody will talk about thermography because it's all mammogram, mammogram, mammogram. Insurance won't cover thermograms. But a thermogram is a good way. It's painless. It's essentially a picture, and it tells if there's inflammation within the breast. And if there is inflammation in the breast, you got some things you can do now to help decrease that. And you check your thermogram serially. There's no risk to thermography as there is serial mammography.
Are they available in this area?
They're not available locally. Yeah, Raleigh, Greensboro, yeah.
Mooresville.
Yeah.
Dr. Castiglia in, actually he's kind of, I guess, Cornelius area. Twice a year they have someone come from there from Hickory.
Do they?
To do it.
Yeah, so it's not available here, but there are places, and I think that will grow too as women become more informed and more educated. And I'm not telling you that's the only thing you ought to have done to diagnose breast cancer, but it's an important thing to look at. They've done, you know, when you do thermograms, a woman takes her bra off, has a thermogram. It's a far different heat pattern than a woman who has gone braless for 24 hours. And there's actually some data to suggest that wearing a bra, or the longer you wear a bra, increases your risk of breast cancer because it impedes lymphatic flow. Brafree.org is a site that has a lot of information on this. You know, it doesn't sound very credible coming from a man up here telling you to take your bras off. But there's actually a lot of research data demonstrating that the more you wear a bra, the higher your risk of developing breast cancer because it impedes lymphatic flow. Underwire bras can serve as a source of attracting electromagnetic radiation, EMF. So brafree.org, that'll lend a little bit more credibility to what I just told you.
Mom's laughing.
Yeah. Now, in an effort to kind of personify cancer, you know, because we're all aware of cancer. I mean, we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Who's not aware of breast cancer? But many of us have not experienced, they haven't been through it. So I kind of created a little parable that I thought would maybe kind of help personify cancer a little bit for us. And it's called Cancer Hates Cabbage. So here goes. You know, you're living your life. You live in your nice home with your nice manicured lawn, freshly fertilized, and things are going pretty well for you. And then one day, new family moves in next door. You know, a husband, a wife, their couple of kids, and they come over and introduce themselves. And you know, there's the Mr. and Mrs., and they have a little son. He's 8 years old. His name is Cancer. And you think to yourself, well, that's kind of a strange name for a kid, but you know, my son Tommy's 8, he needs a friend. Cancer seems like a nice guy. So they develop a friendship. And Cancer comes over and he plays with Tommy. Really, he's not into doing much. He wants to play the Xbox, watch TV. He's constantly hounding you for a soda, for some junk food. He's always walking barefoot across your fertilized lawn. And before you know it, Cancer is so much a part of your life and so overgrown, you wonder how you ever had a life without Cancer. He's everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, there's Cancer. You think, what am I going to do with this guy? You know, I mean, this is Tommy's friend, but... So you talk to some friends, and they make some suggestions to you. So you go to Lowe's, and you know, you see where you typically pick up your Roundup, you see there's chemo on the shelf, and you think, chemo, it's kind of expensive. It looks like there's a lot of side effects, but seems to be what's effective against cancer, so I'm going to buy some of this. So you get your chemo, you take it home, and you use it on Cancer for a little while, and Cancer starts to shrink, and he gets back to the nice little Cancer he was when he was first moved in. But you really don't change anything else. But you're happy, because Cancer's back to what he was. And you're living your life and thinking things are okay, but as time goes on, Cancer hasn't changed any of his habits. He's still coming over, eating the junk food, never going outside, never exercising, and he's big again. And so you start to rethink your plan. What can I do different this time? So you devise a plan. You do a little research. Next time Cancer comes over, he wants to play. You say, look, Cancer, I got a new plan for you. Today, you're going out running. You're running 3 miles with Tommy, and you're doing it without your shirt on. Get a little sun. And you know, Cancer's not keen on this, but you know, he wants to be friends with Tommy, and this is what I got to do, this is what I got to do. So they go out, they run, they get their exercise, get a little bit of sun. Cancer comes back, he can't wait to have that Mountain Dew he's been thinking about. So he starts demanding some sodas or Mountain Dew or whatever. And you hand him a thing of green tea. Of course, you've cooled it down. He's not happy about that either, but he drinks his green tea. He's like, whatever, I'm thirsty, I'm dying here. So feed him some green tea, and you know, he and Tommy are getting along well. So you invite him over for dinner. You think, what the heck? Let's put the full force on the kid. So for dinner, you serve him a broccoli, cabbage, wild-caught salmon casserole smothered with curcumin and black pepper. And maybe a couple sardines as an appetizer. And so, you know, the kid's not crazy about this, but again, he's got a friendship to maintain. He keeps coming over. You keep throwing this at him, and you know, before you know it, he's gone. A couple of months of your life has gone by, and you didn't even realize, but Cancer moved away, and you all live happily ever after. I mean, it's truly just the little things that we can do, and you attack it from all different angles. You know, one more point to make is the difference between false hope and false hopelessness. You know, a lot of people might tell you, he's standing up there and he's giving people false hope. But you know, if you're going through cancer, you're going through anything like this, you've got to have hope. If you don't have hope, you know, there's been scientific studies showing that lack of hope or hopelessness suppresses your immune system. What do you need to fight cancer? You need a good, strong immune system. You know, what I'm really fighting here, and I stole this from David Servan-Schreiber, is false hopelessness. The thought or feeling that we really can't do anything to protect or defend ourselves, and that someday we might just be a victim to cancer. You know, there's no guarantees, even if you live the perfect lifestyle, that you may not develop cancer. But there are certain things that you can do, definitely, to affect the outcome. So, you know, the more you think about your health and wellness, the more I'd encourage you to educate yourself, learn, read, take advantage of things that are available to you. Really, because no one's more interested in your health than you. Not your doctor, not your family, it's you. And, you know, we all have, many of us have great support systems, but it's up to us to learn for ourselves what we can do to make our lives better. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. And I'd be...